To go live. There we go. Good afternoon, and welcome to yet another Dutch Angular Group meetup. Tonight, Thursday, we have, of course, we have a guest with a new talk, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, let me introduce our panelists for the night. We got Jeffrey, who is over
Hi,
here.
everybody.
How are you doing?
Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. We have Stefan as well, inside the cold and freezing Netherlands. How are you doing, Stefan?
Good, still good.
You're still good, still enjoying the cold there?
Exactly.
Speaking about the cold, or actually I should say the warmth, we have B-Man today as our guest from the sunny and hot Colombia. Welcome, B-Man.
Hello, everybody. I'm super glad to be here.
Great. What are you going to talk to us about today?
Today, I'm going to talk about a project called NXPM Stack. It's a full stack software generator that should take us to a working full stack app in 3 single steps.
Well, I'm sold. Without any further ado, B-Man, will you mind taking us into a presentation and take us on the journey here?
Yeah, let's go here. And I'm going to emphasize this in the people in the chat as well. If you have any questions during or I prefer to have my my sessions a little bit more interactive. So I do have some slides and I will explain some stuff, but I hope to focus on the demo part. And let's go. And if there's any questions about the stack or things I explain or things I explain too quickly, please let me know.
In the chat over here. All right, it's all on you, B-Man. Let's go.
Okay, cool. So this is the presentation, and I think I can full screen it like this. Perfect. Okay. So first, let me start off. NXPM Stack is the name of the repo in the package. It's a very boring name. I don't have a fancy name for this project yet. I don't really think it's important. At least for me, it's not. Some people may have seen slides or things about me that are talking about the PANG stack, more specifically PANGG, which is Prisma, Angular, NX, Nest, and GraphQL. I will mention this, but this NXPM stack goes a little bit beyond. So this is just a little bit of context. Now, what we're going to talk about today is automation, having an opinion, and this leads to scale. If you want to build your scalable apps, it's essential to have some opinion, and it's probably even more essential to automate stuff, and we'll go over why this is in a second. First, a little bit about me. I'm from the Netherlands, so it's an especially great honor to be an Angular Dutch. I'm a Dutch guy. I moved away when I was 35, which is like 7 years ago. I'm that old. I'm now living in Colombia with my lovely wife, and I work as a freelance software engineer. I got a history working in system administration and network administration, and I think this might be interesting where my drive for automation comes from. So I'm not a person that started out with software development. It was more like I was automating so much of my work that at a certain point, my manager said, you should be a software engineer. And I was like, well, maybe you're right. So that's been maybe 12 years ago already. So biggest part is a developer, but I have very much an engineering mind when it comes to software. I'm the founder of Bsoft Labs, and we're a nonprofit foundation here in Colombia. And we teach people how to code with the objective of landing them a job. And in 2019, we managed to graduate 9 students, and the big part of them are now working as developers. So that's super exciting. And you can imagine in a country like Colombia, this is a really life-changing event. This is literally going from having no possibilities to being able to live freely like we as developers tend to do. And last but not least, I'm the co-founder of the official Angular Discord. And if you haven't been there already, discord.gg/Angular will take you there. And I'm happy to welcome you there. We're plus 6,000 people right now in 5 months' time. So it's been growing quite a bit. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about the agenda today. And I kind of divided it. It's not I don't have any real fixed lines here, but I'd like to start out with creating a new project so we can see how it goes. These are steps 1 and 2 from the 3-step program. And the reason I start with it is that it takes a little bit of time. Right now, it takes about 5 minutes to create a new application. We'll take a look at why that is. But first, let's do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the why I created this stack. I'm working on this project. I'm going to talk about a little bit more detail about what stack consists of, how it is built, and some design decisions I made, and then demo time. And last time I'm going to focus it on, but if you have questions, please don't be shy to interrupt me. I should see it in the corner of my eye. Let's start with this one. Starting a new project. I think when I escape full screen mode, there should be a terminal. Yes, there's a terminal here. I'll bump it up a little bit. And the first thing you need to do, this is step one, is install the CLI globally. So this is very similar to something like Angular CLI. And let me make sure that this is all here. But yeah, I'm going to give a yarn global add nxpm CLI latest. So the first thing we do is install the CLI. As said, just with Angular CLI, you need to install this globally. And then the second thing we do, and this installed the latest one. I published these yesterday, so and I know there's one bug, in fact, but I couldn't fix it before time. But so this installs version 4.12, and then this gives you access to the binary nxpm stack, and this is the one that we'll use to scaffold out our new application. So we're down one step from 3, and I'm in an empty folder here. I don't have anything, so I can freely start here a new stack and call this thing Sandbox. Now, this will do a few things. It will start out with creating an NX workspace for you with a whole lot of opinions. It will install its dependencies, and it will run the installer. And all in all, this takes about 5 minutes. And I can probably shave a lot of time off of this, but for me, it's not really that interesting that it's like instant today. And we'll see why in a little bit. So while this is running, we can go ahead, and when we come to the demo, we can take a look at the screen and see what happens. And then let's pray for the demo gods that everything goes well. So that's creating a new project. Why am I doing this? Why am I working on this stuff? Well, it turns out building scalable apps is hard. It's pretty hard. And for those of you that worked in larger apps, you all know this, that at some point you need to take decisions, and at some point you might wish there was somebody that helps you explain how this stuff works. This was me a few months back as well. I've been working with NX since it got started. I'm a first-day user of NX, the original one. I've been playing around a lot with it. I did a lot of projects in it, and I did a lot of things wrong. So I learned the wrong way. I definitely know what's the wrong way. And it wasn't up until a few months back when in my YouTube channel, I invited Lars Brink, famous person in the Angular community. And we talked about structuring NX workspaces, and he told me how to scale things. So this was definitely an essential point in making this project happen. Another thing that's interesting to know, I was doing a lot of same things at a lot of projects. So I think it's interesting to realize that I kind of divide it to two types of developers. One type of developer is somebody that works at a company, and you work at one project, and this is your project, and this is the thing you're working on. Now, this is a very normal situation if you're contracted by a company and you work on, let's say, your company's platform. On the other hand, there's developers that build out new projects each week, and this is where I fall in. I build a lot of client projects. I build a lot of prototypes for clients, and I was doing the same thing over and over and over again. I was re-implementing authentication. I was re-implementing user management. I was rethinking the structure on how to scale it this time. And I've had this idea for years that it should be able to automate things. And this is where my history comes into play. I'm used to automating things. And in fact, the time when I got to work, it was like back in '99. In the Netherlands, people would say, you work in automation. You werkt in automatisering. So in the Netherlands, working in tech, working with computers, is literally working in automation. And I think this is something that we might not always take into account. I think it's very essential to have this capability, automate whatever you do. Trust me, you won't lose your job over it. So this is one of the risks people give it. I don't think so. And last but not least, I really, really love NX. NX Workspace is what makes this all possible. I love the product. I think it really, really fills a need. I love the team. It's a great company, Narwhal. They have some really, really smart people working there. And they really care about us developers using their projects. So that's a little bit about the why I started this. And then let's take it up to what actually is it, the NXPM stack. I see Jeffrey coming on. If you have any questions.
No, just here for you.
Perfect. Awesome. So NXPM stack. What it does, it adds an opinionated structure to NX Workspace. It allows you to create fully working full stack apps, and they're fully type safe. So from database to UI, it's all type safe. And if you're interested in about more detail about the components I selected, I invite you to check the Angular Air stream I did, I think 4 months ago, where I talk about PangStack. I go into more detail about what type safety is in what part of the stack. And this leads to some very interesting things, mainly 2 things. You can do error-driven development, which means you can just start by using something and have the type system help you make this thing come into place. Or the other hand, you can do a lot of code generation because it's at each layer where you have type safety, you can generally get this type information and generate code off of this. And this really helps in scaling. NXPM stack includes authentication. It supports cookie-based authentication out of the box with a very simple option to switch to header-based authentication, token-based auth, if that's what you're using. And it includes basic user management. So an admin can go in, change a user password, or a user can change their own password. All of these little things that we all probably built several times, all of us, that don't really differ between apps, and it takes a lot of time to get right.
Can I ask you a question about that just straight off the bat? I'm sure you're going to go more into detail about these things because this one hits home for me, like the authentication and having to redo all that.
Yeah,
is such a recognizable issue I find in like projects I do. I'm sure we're going to get into it more, so maybe I'm a little bit early, but is this more like the architecture surrounding authentication and user management, so having the bearer tokens being generated and verifying that, or is it like even including full-on like admin suite where you could see all your users and manage all that?
Both. So I started out with the first one. At first, I wanted to have, as you said, token generation.
Yeah,
and validation.
Name it. You can name it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For validation, authentication, the whole shebang. Yeah.
Yeah. Just make sure that you can protect your endpoints, basically. Now, for that, and this is the interesting part, your client will come and say, "Oh, I only want this user to be able to access this," and then you, in your mind, are like, "Okay, I need to have access control. I need to role-based access. I need to guard my endpoints for using this." So there's a lot of questions that raises you. Whereas often what you need, initially at least, is just have something that works. Something that works, that blocks access.
Get it going. We can always expand on it, yeah.
Exactly, that's totally the idea. So I started with this, and then I realized that it's nice, but you still need to do a lot of things yourself. So then I basically set my goals toward my proof of concept is done when I got an admin logging in and being able to create a new user, make that user admin and log in so you can pass on your credentials, because that's the next thing. Now your client wants to test your app and they want to have admin access. And then, but it didn't stop here. It didn't stop there, because then I found myself copying over my account management where a user does their self-service. So they want to change their password, they want to change their email. So I kind of raised the bar a little bit each time by adding more, but it will most likely stop here. But there's a lot of things. I mean, we didn't talk about authorization, but having a multi-tenant system where somebody can go in, think about GitHub organizations. You go in there, you give access to coworkers. It's all possible. It's all very simple with this stack, but I need to stop somewhere. So
well, you've made me completely curious, so please continue.
Yeah.
You just made me happy because you saved me a lot of hours with this stack, right?
Well, I hope. Like, I'm thinking my future project might be with this, but I'm super curious now. So come on, you've got me all riled up.
Let me get one tip right off the bat. Don't tell this to your manager that you found this amazing tool. Just tell him it takes you like 20 hours to build this, and then you can sit on the I was say you can sit on the balcony with the wife, but that's probably very Colombian.
We'll go ice skating.
Go ice skating. Before I continue, let's quickly peek at how this is working. Okay, installer is still running. I just wanted to double check that one. So we get a fully type safe system. It includes user authentication as well, the backend as the front end. And additionally, it leaves you with some tools for doing rapid development on top of this stack. Because if you only generate something and that's it, yes, it's nice, but then maybe the whole structure hurts more than it gives you. And additionally, last thing that I think is very important, best practices are encouraged. So if you start a new project, it will come with working tests. It will come with a GitHub Actions workflow, so you can do a git push and it will just start running your tests there, which makes it kind of harder to submit a test that at some point fails. So if this is something that's important for you or your company, you probably want to get this right off the bat and not add this something when you're like 2 months in and now you don't really know what to test. And another thing of the best practices that I like to focus on is enhanced linting and basically linting and validation of your project. So to give you an example, NXPM Stack has tools that sort some things alphabetically. I think a lot of people should sort more things alphabetically. There's really no reason to put things in order of appearance if you have like a list of items. And even more so if you have a workspace with like tens or hundreds of libraries, you really want this stuff to being sorted. And it's for sanity of mind. So you can read stuff if you're eyeballing it. But even more so, it really helps with merge conflicts. So a lot of people don't really realize this. But if you have a lot of apps, people working together, merge conflicts are often fixed by sorting. So
there's a question. I mean, I guess we just opened a little box there when we started talking about authentication for a quick second.
Very good.
Michiel Kikkert, he's asking if can auth be easily switched out with something like Firebase auth maybe? He says auth, I'm thinking he's talking Firebase or Auth0 perhaps, but yeah.
Mr. Michiel, good to see you here, first of all. And
Send you, hi Michiel.
Mr. Frog T. Yeah, so auth, the way it currently works, and this is kind of the theory in the stack, I take a lot of decisions for the one building it because otherwise there's no end to it. However, I do take into account that you most likely want to do authentication with a third-party provider. You probably should if you're going to take this project to the new level. So right now, auth is implemented in a few places, and I haven't really got experience connecting my backend to Firebase and Auth0, but if it's doable in Node, you can definitely do it inside this stack. So there's basically, I try to make a lot of small touch points where you have to make some decision, but it's not infested throughout your whole backend. So this should be definitely possible.
I guess we could step straight into a little bit more broader question to get you back on the actual talk you're giving here. Kevin van Schaik with a question about the workspace. Is it better to start a workspace with the stack, or can we easily move an existing project into this workspace or a workspace like this?
That's an interesting point. So right now, again, it's opinionated. So the opinion is you should start with a new scratch and move your work into this. And this is not feasible for all projects. If you have your own NX workspace and you already have like 50 libraries, migrating it to NXPM stack will at least cost you like, let's say 3 or 4 hours if you know what you're doing. So with that being said, it's all working based on NX generators. So if you just want to have a part of the app, you can definitely do so. You have to ask yourself, how much sense does it make? Like, for instance, if you spin up the front end, it has a lot of assumptions about the backend, that it talks GraphQL and that it finds certain endpoints. So only scaffolding out the front end app doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The backend in the other side makes a lot of sense. You can just start out with the backend. And in fact, I got one of my clients who is a React shop, and they work with my backend, but have the same structure in React. Currently, I don't support React out of the stack. This will be there in a short time. But what they use is they start out the whole backend based on NXPM and then add their own layers to it. So you can definitely mix and match. But initially, at this moment, the encouraged workflow is whatever we do inside this this demo here. Great questions, by the way. Keep them coming.
Awesome, will do.
Cool. So tools for rapid development help you be productive after the fact is generated, and its best practices are encouraged, or if can, automate it. And we'll get to more details in a bit. Let's go quickly over NX Workspace. I assume most people at least have heard of NX Workspace. It's built by Narwhal, and it started out as an extension set on top of Angular CLI. But these days, it's grown out to their own ecosystem. They have their own CLI. It has still very good support for Angular apps, but now also supports other things. They give modern tooling to manage your workspace, and with modern tooling, we can talk about Jest for testing and Cypress to do end-to-end tests. It comes with Prettier out of the box. There's a whole bunch of tools that they add by default that we otherwise would probably add manually. And yeah, this helps a lot. Now, NX promotes splitting up your libraries into applications and libraries. And this is probably the most common thing people tell you. So when they give you a one-on-one on NX Workspace, it's like, okay, this is NX Workspace. You split up your apps into libraries, but how? They often don't really tell or know how. NX understands these dependencies. That means it can build a dependency tree or dependency graph, and it will understand what parts of your app changed so it can be smart about these kind of things. For instance, only test the code that changed or the related code, but don't test code that is already changed, that's already tested. NX works very well with very, very large projects. So I got a few client projects that are coming into, let's say, 100 or 80 or 90 entities in the database. So you can imagine that if you have code to manage all these entities, you get thousands of files. With NX, you can scale this basically infinitely. And I haven't worked on them myself, but I know that NX, the team, they also do consultancy. They work with clients that have like thousands of libs. So it can very, very much scale. NX is aware of this, the few challenges that you have. For instance, one configuration file, think Angular JSON, but with 1,000 libraries is going to be messy anyway, even if you have sorting. So they're thinking about even splitting this up further, but it's designed for very, very large things. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work well for small apps. However, it's not a minimal code approach. And this is another thing to realize. If you buy into this stack, you're going to have a lot of files and you're going to have a lot of folders, and you need to understand the structure. So it's pretty verbose in this sense, but you get a lot of benefits for this. Last thing to note, there's an awesome plugin system, which is what makes this all possible. And there's a great community with community plugins. So anything that doesn't work out of the box with NX today might work very soon. It's a very extensible piece of software. And let me get focused back here. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit about structuring NX workspaces. As mentioned, an NX workspace is often divided between apps and libs. And when we check at this image here, we see that I got an API, and this API loads in a library API authentication, and it loads an API product. And then on the other hand, my web loads in a library web authentication and web product. And all of these have some shared interest. This is, let's say these are your interfaces. So the shape of your data, and this is very nice, one-on-one. Why do you want to use NX? And how do you do this? And this works pretty well for small apps, because small apps don't have a lot of interdependencies, and they generally pretty much isolated in their functionality, and this can work, and this is the easiest way to wrap your head around. But it doesn't scale. And if you worked with a situation or an app similar to this, you will realize that at some point you will lead into things like circular dependencies, which is, if we were in a live session, I would ask to raise hands, and probably a lot of people of you would raise hands. Yeah, Jeff there, thanks a lot for supporting me. Let's all imagine that the whole crowd is cheering like, hey, Beeman found the solution. It's not my idea, but the solution to this is add another layer. Let me refresh this because I just wanted to refresh the image. There you go. That didn't happen. So we go from this structure where we have the applications adding in their functionality, we go to a more layered structure. And the layered structure here is important because we're now starting to divide our libraries into types of libraries. And I listed out a few libraries. In general, there's 4 types of libraries that NX distinguishes. It's a feature library, which adds literally functionality. So in a front end, this would be your container components, and your routes would live here. In a backend, if you have a REST API, this is where your controllers live and your API endpoints. In a GraphQL API, this is also where your queries and your endpoint live. So this is basically the feature layer. Now, the feature layer is a very small and thin layer, and it delegates everything it does, mainly to a data layer in the backend. So as soon as a request comes in, it delegates it to the data layer. And in the future, on the front end, it most likely delegates a lot of work to their UI layer. So you have this is where your smart components live. Now, the interesting thing of having like one level of indirection here is that you can set rules of what things can import from each other. And this is what prevents your circular depths. So in this image here, you can see that features are always importing data, but it's a one-way direction. So data will never import from a feature. Doesn't make sense if you think about it. Like there's no need for some part of your app to include a routed component other than the router. And the same goes for the backend. You just want this indirection so that features are isolated, are your endpoints, literally your endpoints if you talk about an API, but they can ask data and data can share between each other. And while this is not a guarantee, this structure allows you to live without a single circular depth. And if you have a layer like this and you cannot figure out how to do this without circular depths, hit me up and I'll happy to help you, because there's always a way around it if you have this indirection. So this is an essential part in structuring apps and making them scalable. So we moved from one to one with a layer. Now this is all nice and good and it works as expected, but there's still kind of an issue here. And if you look closely, you can see that this API and this web applications, which are here in the top level, they need change and they grow as we grow our app. So let's say we have 50 of these API libraries, then I need to go in my API app and update them all the time. Now our goal is to not touch the apps. The apps should be as simple as possible and everything should be delegated to libraries. So the way to formalize this is to add another layer. In NX, if you're in doubt, probably want to add another library. If there's anything that's not working well or you're not sure how to do it, you might very well need another library in the middle. And libraries are cheap in the idea of they're easy to make, they're easy to rename. So there's directives to rename things if you're not happy with the name. They're easy to delete and get rid of, and they're very fast to build because every library will be cached. So if you build it once, you don't change the code, NX will cache it for you. So in a lot of sense, it makes sense to add more libraries because more possibility for caching and more optimization in dev speed. But in this new design, and this is the design that we're working with in the stack, we have a new indirection here. These ones are actually features, if you think about it. So my API now only loads a core feature, and this core feature, which is a library feature by itself, imports all other features, all other functionality. And now this makes it super clear because we still don't violate the rule. An app only can import a feature. Well, that's checked. Feature can import another feature. That's fine. And feature can only import data and nothing is importing the feature from another thing. And the same thing goes with web. We have a bit of a different naming here. It's called the shell. But this is where all your routes live and then build out your app. So this is the scalable architecture for NX. It's promoted by the NX team in their book, Narwhal Monorepos for Angular, or something like this. Hit me up on Twitter if you want to know the exact name. It's a free book. It's a quick read. It's like 40 pages. You read it in like an hour or two. And it explains, it explains why this structure is there. And additionally, I got some content in my YouTube channel, I think about 4 hours, where I talk with Lars Brink about how to structure NX workspaces. And this is really what led me to building this generator, because I liked it, but it was a lot of commands, a lot of places where you can do stuff wrong. So I thought, let's formalize it a little bit.
Make sure you tweet out that link to that video later on then.
Yeah, definitely do that. So I got a slide with questions so far. Let's put it right now, because I think this might be a good thing. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, just on the picture you just showed about the layers and that kind of stuff, right? So I know that there is like a tags functionality in the NX workspace where you can say, okay, if it has this tag, for example, shared, it cannot be used at the API level, for example. Yeah. Would you also like recommend this for all the different slides that you've made here? Like definitely. API product can only use API product tag, and API authorization can only use API authorization.
Yeah, totally. I totally encourage doing this. And this is one of the best practices that are applied. So if you generate a library with NX, plain NX, you need to think about these things. You need to think about what kind of library it is, what tags do I want. NXPM, on the other hand, assumes these kind of things for you. So with NXPM, you no longer think about, I'm going to build a library. You think about, I want to add a UI library. And you give a command to build a UI library, and it will apply the right tags for you, put it in the right place, give it the right name. And I do 2 tags by default. Scope is one. And scope you can basically map to what is your application. So all the blue ones here will be mapped scope web. So it's all web stuff. And all the red ones will be called scope API. And then they have a type. So this one will be scope API type feature. And then it's up to you to add your own level. So if you want, like Jeff, the example that you just gave, auth can only import from certain areas. This is very, very common to have another layer, but now it's up to the user. Because there's a lot of things where I, as the generator of your project, cannot really decide what you want to do.
Yeah, I can totally agree on that. I think that the structure you just explained is pretty good for the starting, right? For the starting of your project and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it really helps doing this. And this is one of these kind of things, and I'll get back to this later on. But if you don't automate it, people will forget it. I forgot to add tags. And then you look into your editor, and then ESLint is complaining, like, hey, you cannot import this. Yeah, you didn't put your tags there. So great question here with regards to that. Now, when we think about NX Workspace, NX Workspace has a few characteristics, and one of it is it thinks in terms of technology. So this is how they make their split. This is their abstraction. So they say, okay, you either pick Narwhal Angular or Narwhal React if you want to build a front end. And if you want to have a back end, maybe you use Narwhal Nest or Narwhal Express if that's your jizz, or you use any of the community plugins. But it's all based on technology. That's where they make the division. And it's on a pretty low level because these generators allow you to spin up maybe a basic app or a library, but never both. They will only all these generators will just generate one library, and that's it. Now, on the other hand, NXPM stack generates functionality. And this is an interesting division, and it might not be very clear from the start. But if in NXPM stack you talk about an API, you don't talk about how it's implemented. You see API as an entity. And the same goes for web. So we can talk about, hey, generate an API, and then have the user pick which technology they want. We'll go into this a little bit deeper in a little bit, but in essence, this is a new abstraction layer based on functionality. And where NX generates one library per command, this NXPM stack generates a whole bunch of libraries. So if you run this one, and for the person asking earlier on if you can do this in a new workspace, you can take a new workspace, install this dependency, run this generator API, and it will generate the API app, its end-to-end test, and a whole opinionated structure on how to do this. So we're no longer talking about, hey, I'm going to add a library to my project. No, you're going to add a functionality. This also allows you, and this is something that I'm still experimenting on, this allows you to build one API and 2 identical front ends in the same projects. Now, I'm still experimenting, as said, because if you generate 2 identical front ends, you're probably going to have a lot of duplication that you're not interested in. So then the second one you generate, you probably want to generate a lot less because the first one already has this code. And this is where you get into a more common shared base where you basically, let's say your authentication pages will all be shared. Your user account management will all be shared. From a technical point though, it's totally possible to add one API with 5 front ends, fully fledged, fully independent of each other. And so this is, I think, an interesting thing to notice. We step up one level and we go from technology, and from single library, we go to functionality, which are groups of libraries that add working functionality to your app. And then I come with a question so far. If there's in the meanwhile not any other questions, I'm
sure people are just waiting for for getting into
into the demo.
Getting into it.
Yeah.
So
we can quickly see if this already finished. Okay, it finished. That's good. So Now, Pang stack. What do we generate with this stuff? Today, that's the Pang stack. Now, this white image you see here, I couldn't figure out how to put NX workspace on top of it, but this is your typical NX workspace generated with NXPM stack today. And we go from left to right. We first look at Postgres, which is the database where it's actually happening, but we don't touch Postgres. We only talk Prisma. Prisma allows for schema-driven database development where your schema is king. It will generate everything for you. And it gives you a very, very nice, fully type-safe experience. A breath of fresh air if you're used to working with type ORM. So it's probably most compared to type ORM. If you use type ORM today and you haven't used Prisma, definitely check it out because it's the best way to do APIs, databases in Node. And if you don't agree, we cannot be friends. I guess it's going to get to that level. No, it's a great tool. I don't want to get hostile here. So Prisma is our schema-driven database, and it will generate a client that we consume with Nest.js. So looking at this slide, it would probably have made sense if I made this little ball green here because it's an auto-generated thing. We don't need to worry about it. Nest.js, this is where opinion comes in. I like working with Nest, building my APIs with Nest. So this is what you get generated today. And another strong opinion for me is that GraphQL is the best fitted tool for this job because it allows you to generate a whole lot of front-end code, boilerplate that you would normally write yourself. So in this stack, there's not one custom API call being made. It's all auto-generated. This is kind of nice because I'm super lazy, but it's also kind of nice because once we change something in our API, it will reflect in the front end and it will not build. So it's also some kind of security that you know, like my front end cannot ask endpoints that don't exist, or it cannot send a data layer, a data object in the backend that doesn't exist. So this is the Pang stack. It generates Prisma, Angular, Nest in NX with GraphQL, and Ionic will be a very, very close second. So hopefully end of next month, I will have Ionic being generated.
So the Pang GG stack then.
Yeah, the Pang GG, and this is kind of where I have to let go of the numbers because actually I coined this term for the Angular Air episode. But let's take a look at the next slide because this is beyond the Pang stack. Now, what if we want to do something else? And if you look at this image, it went by quickly, but I can toggle between them. You can see that there's two things that are changing, the red part and the blue part. Now, in this stack, I've decided that I want to build my backend with Go. I'm dabbling my toes into Go. I really like working with it. It's super nice. It has a very great dev experience. But also, it requires me to learn a whole lot of things, how to scale Node Go apps, which I'm not particularly familiar with. And here you see the React front end and the Flutter front end. So React is already a thing. I got working code that works with this stack, and React works pretty well. Flutter is something that basically is like whatever mobile technology you want to do. The point here is that this stack doesn't really limit you. As long as I create the right schematics, we can generate whatever you like. And the important part here is that your contract with the database stays the same, so the same field structure, and your GraphQL layers need to stay the same. But you can already see when you have more of these building blocks and you can mix and match together. So my final result is, the final goal here is that you can create a new stack with a backend of choice, whether it's a Nest or Go at this point, a front end of choice. So you can have like your admin in Angular and your front end in React, if that's what you like, and a mobile web at choice. So this is kind of where we're moving towards, and I got a little roadmap down below. So let's get into the demo. This is interesting stuff. So I think I'm gonna just do this full screen and we can take a look at what we've done here. So this all went well. That's good. I'm happy to see this. So let's count steps again. The first step that we do is the global add. Second step, we do NXPM init sandbox. So that's number 2. Now, I was a bit of doubt. I need to cd into the directory. Is this another step? If so, it's 4 steps. But if this is considered like normal work, we're still on 3 steps. And the API will tell you what you can do. So to get started, move into your folder. and run yarn setup. And I'm going to run this yarn setup. In the meanwhile, I'm going to open this project inside our editor so we can take a look at it. And let me see if the editor opens here. It probably pops open to my second screen. Yeah, I'll be there in a sec. And actually, yesterday when I was preparing this talk, I was like, I guess actually the installer can go into my directory and run this yarn setup for me, probably with some option to opt out to that behavior. So I'm still very much tweaking how this all works, but these were the steps I was doing manually before. So I used to always create a new NX workspace and start with it, and then install my dependencies. Let's say I want to work with Angular and Nest, and then I would start and start as a maniac, go generating all my apps, all my libs, copying over code from other projects. So this is what I do right here. Install the dependencies, and then we basically run this generator. It runs the init generator from NXPM stack, and this is where all the things come together. So this init knows how to create an API. It knows how to create your web front end. It knows how to create a bunch of things. And we can pull this one in right here, sit it next to the editor or the terminal. There we go. So yeah, this is basically what the installation consists of, and something it needs to do a yarn install at several places, because like schematics make changes, but if you want to use one of those recently installed libraries, you need to install it first. So there's still a few tricks in here. One of the other tricks, we rewrite your Git history, so you get left off with a clean Git project with no open files, no stage files. And then afterwards, we run the setup, and then make sure Docker Compose is running. So it's let me quickly see what I got here in Docker. Just a minute ago. I'm just going to run setup again. It should be pretty much able to run this several times. And also my computer is pretty busy.
In the meanwhile, whilst we wait for Docker to spin up, a question here from Michiel again. I see Tailwind there. Is that configurable? Can we use Bootstrap?
Yeah, that's a very great point, Michiel. It is configurable. The option is there. You can indeed configure Bootstrap. Bootstrap is, as you all know, lighter on the classes, so less stuff to get rid of. With that being said, at this very moment, I don't really maintain the Bootstrap integration, because it's hard enough already to build this out with one stack, and this is mainly to do with my dev experience. If I want to add something new, an end-to-end test for this project costs about 5 to 7 minutes, and there's other things as well. So the project itself is managed in NX, which is awesome. So my NXPM stack is built using NX, but I'm using version 10, and I cannot really easy make changes to parts. So yes, multiple layouts are coming. It's definitely high on the list. Right now you can generate Bootstrap, but you won't get an as immersive experience. So let me go here and let's see, why is this still running? Okay, now let's move quickly while the setup is running, and it looks like Docker this time did connect, so that's good. Now let's take first a look at the apps that got created here, and as we're on the Angular meetup, we can start by looking at the Angular app, and this might be surprising to a few, but unsurprising to most. It's reading my file in. It's taking a pretty long time here.
You reckon we got time for a quick intermezzo again?
Yeah, totally.
Before we run out of time for the whole talk, but as we wait for that. So there was a question here from KK about splitting libraries by submodules like Angular does with the specific material package, where you have the material button and material icon, which is basically tree shaking, but then is followed up by having one huge library that needs to be split by modules, but also delivered by one NPM package. The question strikes me as something that would be more NX related than NXPM related, right?
Correct. I think this also in their question, they say, can NX split a library? Yes,
Fair.
they can.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yes, they can. NX can do this, and I'm thinking about an example project that actually does this, but it's definitely possible. Actually, it all comes down to the place where you run your dist. So if you can make your dist, if you can fool your dist in such a way that it will generate that structure, that Angular material made famous probably, then it works. So this does work. And my buddy Chow and we did some exploration around how this would look. But yeah, that's definitely possible.
If it's not really directly related to NXPM, that sounds like a perfect tweet coming up in the next few hours. What do you think?
I might as well. I might very well.
So KK, keep a look at B-Man's tweet right there.
Yeah. I think, okay, so I opened it in VS Code here, which should be a little bit less on the resources. We're going to open the web app real quick. And then what you see here, the app component is pretty non-eventful. This is just a router outlet. And if you look at the app module, you'll see something here that surprised me by first. This is your app module. And I think it's already on the fat side because I'm importing 2 features here, which I should not. I'm violating my own rule. But yeah, if you build your Angular apps in NX this way, like a super tiny app module and postponing, delegating everything, I think you're doing it right. Any other solution, I think, doesn't scale. But I'm pretty opinionated on this, but this is what it looks like. Now, and then if we quickly peek into the API, this is a very similar experience. So API only, I load in the feature here, which is core feature, and I have a little script here that makes the API host the front end. So with this stack, if you push it all up and you push it to Heroku, it will build and it will host itself. So it's automatic hosting the front end out of the box. So another thing you don't have to worry about. I'll hurry up a little bit, and I think in the meanwhile we can go ahead and start these. Don't changes. I'm going to start the API. So it says yarn dev API, and I'm going to start web here, yarn dev web. So then this can compile along while I explain some more. And I'm going to start a third dev server, and the third dev server is my SDK. So the GraphQL SDK gets generated automatically, and we need to run this as a separate dev server. So that'll be SDK Web Watch. And having these 3 things running next to each other, this gives a very cool effect down the line. So, but first of all, let's make sure that this all runs and that my computer is a bit happy. So one of the things to note here that NX API doesn't give you by default. We have an end-to-end test for our API. So working with GraphQL, I think having an end-to-end test for your API makes a lot of sense. It often is a nice first layer of confidence that a unit test don't really give you. So what I try to do, every query that I run in my front end, I'm also having an API end-to-end test. And GraphQL can help here as well generate these things for you, or at least all the interfaces. And then into the libraries, this is where we have the structure represented. And this here, and specifically the API, should be very straightforward. So let's say, okay, we want to talk about user. Here you have data access and feature. Authentication, data access, feature. We have some auth utilities. For example, utilities to hash your password would live here. And then for account and core, this is all super similar. So this is the structure that you're looking at. And then inside here, you have your libraries and where your actually code lives. And for the front end, this is all very similar. Front end is all here. And then this is the shell that we talked about. So if you're curious, where are my routes? Well, here they are. These are the routes that you initially make up the meat of your project. So cool. And then another last thing I want to focus on what gets generated here is the concept of workspace generators. So NX allows you to run schematics or generators from within your own project. So you can write these things in your project. You can run them in your project. And what I like about these things is that they're highly tweakable. So I'm not going to decide how you want to build your features because I'm there to give you a reasonable default. But it's totally up to you to do it differently. So if you build APIs with this and you say, I don't like the name data access because it's too long, I prefer to call it data, you can go here and then change this thing right here, and any new library that you will generate will do it using these things. So if you always see yourself doing the same thing and repeatedly execute the same NX commands, think about building a workspace generator, because it might very well be what you're looking for. And then last thing to notice here, the little setup script that we just saw that failed Docker, this is also workspace schematic, because I figured if you generate a project with this setup is nice to have, because it allows users to onboard quickly. So they don't need to remember, oh, I need to copy .env file and I need to set something and I need to start up. But I cannot assume that I know everything for your app. So this is also built here inside the workspace. So it invites you to hack and tweak this kind of stuff. So that's all there. Now we can, well, we can wait a second for the API for the front end to build, and then look at what gets generated. And I think this is on its last things.
Yeah, so maybe in the meanwhile, there's NG Marius very kindly offering, as you've written all these schematics with Angular Dev Kit, which is very cool. But he's offering to help if you want to rewrite it all into NX11 Dev Kit. Is that a thing you're?
Angie Marius, yeah. I'm super excited to write it in NX11, and I can definitely use some help. There's a reason I didn't start it. And actually, I did start it on my live stream, I think 3 weeks back. I was like, I'm going to convert it. And then I ran into a bug. This was an issue with NX. And then
maybe it's fixed. Yeah.
Yeah, like one of them is fixed. One of them is still working on. So I briefly mentioned, in the current setup, one of the things that's limiting me is my own dev speed in the NXPM stack. So it takes like 7 minutes to do a full stack.
Oh, I see.
And my biggest source of truth and my most useful test in NXPM stack has been an end-to-end test. So I would go create a new workspace, install this toolkit, and run an app, make sure it builds, make sure you add functionality and it keeps building, because that's my only real proof that I have that the whole thing works together. Now in NX11, this should be way faster, but with these current bugs, I cannot. But Marius, by all means, please get in touch. Let's talk on Discord or Twitter and see how I can bring you on, because this is super interesting.
Cool.
Okay, looks like my front end's loading here. Yes, okay, awesome. This all goes well. Dragging in my awesome. Now, here you go. There you have it. This is NXPM stack, a generated full stack app. And one of the things the setup does is it generates seed data. So this is another thing that a lot of people don't really spend time on. But initially, you want to have some way to quickly scaffold data. So in this case, it's adding a new user. It's logging in with the admin. And this is the UI that you get. This is the basis. This is what a new NXPM stack looks like. And you see two big buttons here, Manage Account and Admin. So Manage Account is the user account self-service. This is where you would go in. It looks like I got a scrolling issue here, but you probably get the point. So this is where somebody can change their own details. They can change their own username. They can add various email addresses. So I found out in my experience, most of my apps, the user actually wants to have multiple email addresses. So you can add them. You can make them default. There's the notion of private and public. It really just misses the buttons here to make things private and public. And you can delete stuff. And of course, you cannot delete stuff that's there by default. So you cannot delete your primary email. All pretty much the basics here. And password reset. So this is user self-service. Very, very common and essential technology if you don't want to drive crazy your admins. And then talking about admin, here's the admin. So this is a little admin section, and for now, it only has user management. But this, Bjorn, is what I think you referred to, like second stage of authentication.
This is great.
So what I can do here is create a new admin and use my email address. I'm going to use it here as username as well. Just basically let it leave the defaults. I do need to change my password explicitly because that field doesn't exist. And even though you get an error, now my password is set. So I should be able to log out and log in with my own credentials, and I see my own user. And because I'm admin, I have access to this admin stuff. So this is the base. I would say pretty decent base. Thank you very much for applauding.
You did a great job, man. This looks really amazing.
This is sick.
Thanks, man. Thanks. So, and Jeff, I know you checked out the project a few weeks ago. It wasn't by far anywhere near these things. I moved very quickly. I have a client that I'm working with, who is actually investing in me building out this thing, and this is super exciting for me. So if your company is interested in this kind of thing, hit me up and we can do cool stuff together.
Yeah, it looks much better, and this, what I just said, it's great to see that it's come this far, right? And you're doing such an amazing job on this stack.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate the motivation. So we're running close out of time. I think I need about like 10 more minutes, if that's good for you all.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Should be fair. Keep it going, man.
Awesome.
Doing a great job.
Awesome. Okay, so this is the basis, and now how to extend it. And this is, I think, another very common pattern at different layers of the stack. You have great tools, but now how to do your own stuff and how to build stuff with this in mind. This was a very common thing that I had. Now I can write a whole lot of documents that talk about which things should import from what and what the best practices are. But these things generally work better if you enforce them. So I went ahead and built this. And this is the functionality that came in last night. And this is still buggy. I know there's one bug. I hope it's there for consistency. Let's pull up this one right here and set the terminal next to the API. So I got the terminal here. And remember, I got 3 dev servers running here. So I got my API, I got my web here, and I got my GraphQL SDK generator here. So how it works is, when I add a new GraphQL query here, my little thing here below will detect that I created a new GraphQL endpoint. So basically, hey, your API published a new endpoint. This one's going to run to make sure that it's still valid. Now, if we just add stuff, this will generally always be valid. If we don't change stuff, but we just add endpoints, there's no problem here. Now, my front end will recompile when this fella recompiles. Basically, they should sit in between each other, because this GraphQL SDK generator reads from the API, provides for your front end. Now, let's do something cool, and let's look at what it would look like to add a new entity to our database and some management interface. I generally go with companies. So I'm going to add a new company model. And there are several use cases for doing companies. One of them is the plural of companies is not simply by adding an S to it. Tacking an S to it will not work. Then when you get companies with a Y, and we probably all know this kind of things. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and run an nxpm stack. And actually, it's already there. I'm going to go ahead and create the API CRUD. And bear in mind, so this is all new. API CRUD, I pass in the name of the model, and I pass in its plural name. And now when we run this, it will go into Prisma and add my data model here. And it will generate all the libraries it needs for the backend to accommodate this new model. I think it's, yeah, there you go. This is what works now, and you should see that the front end now, or the back end now, crashes, because this has to do with TypeScript. It will have a change inside tsconfig, and this is the little bug I mentioned where I forgot to add an import. So let me quickly add this bug, and we can just pretend that this didn't happen. But we can see here it created the company stuff, and what I forgot to add was doing my import properly right here. So I need to go in real quick, and this feature got added here. It's just that the import is not there. So I'm going to quickly add the import here, import this from at sandbox /API/company/feature. So this will be, after the call, I will be fixing this one. And now it says, hey, I cannot find this library. And that's correct, because these things, as you probably know, are added in tsconfig. And in order to fix this, I need to restart my dev server. So this is still very much my limitation on why I cannot automate this fully, because like TypeScript doesn't read these kind of things. So we're going to restart the API, and we're going to also reapply the changes to Prisma. So for this, again, I think it's like a 3 or 4 step process. You generate the code, you give your backend API a nudge so it can reread your new changes. But if all goes well, then now our API should compile. And now look, if this one runs again, it opens again on this port, it's syncing our database, and now it runs into our port. We should see this last one being triggered, and the little screen down below will refresh. And this in turn will kick off my front end to restart. So that's all basically checking it all works and it's all valid. And if you're not sharing your screen in a presentation, this goes a little bit faster. But yeah, definitely try this all out yourselves. But yeah, this is the web part, and I'm gonna already prepare the front end part because it's the same command, but then web crud, and this runs the same. So I'm already gonna prepare that. Right now it's 2 commands, and you might have guessed it, but I'm working on a workspace generator that does these commands for you. But right now it's a little bit involved because you have to restart the server, and
yeah, you need to kind of understand what you're doing, like what you're changing.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering though, like you now have 3 or 4 separate processes going on in here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like, I'm pretty sure there's like concurrently and like other like applications running, considering most of it is probably node based.
Yeah.
To run these like as a singular process, but have them emit their own events under a different tag or something. Is that something you might be looking into as well? Because having 4 terminals with a lot of heavy processes could be a little overwhelming, I guess.
I think the most thing I see is that it's confusing for people to know what to start. So a very common thing is somebody changes something in the API, but they don't run the SDK generator. So that's
I can imagine. Yeah.
So that's a common thing. I think if you're working on full stack apps, you're always going to have like multiple terminals with multiple
for sure.
things.
Yeah.
So
totally.
And I started looking into these run all solutions. So you have npm package, I think it's called run all or npm run all. The downside that I think of that is that now I lose the ability to only restart my API, because if I need to restart it all, and this can be
or you need to turn it interactive or something, so you just have like a command saying restart API or restart this package or whatever. Yeah, but I understand that's way down the line if that ever comes. So yeah. Looks like the compiler finished,
Compiler finished, this ran in the meanwhile, and this now finished as well. And let's refresh the app and we see this. And okay, so backend is now prepared. It has company and companies. And now I'm going to run the front end. And something cool occurred to me is that the new Angular CLI as of version 10, I think, or 11, will automatically pick up changes in tsconfig. So I no longer need to restart this. Now, this is super cool because it motivates me to look into how they did this and basically migrate that to the nest part, because this is exactly what I need. If something changes, I need to know and restart the servers for you.
Yeah, maybe you should talk to Sander sometimes from the Scully team.
Yeah.
They're doing some things also, I think, around this thing, to run Scully and the Angular CLI combined and watching changes. I'm not sure how, but
I think we're pretty much looking at similar issues there, and definitely going to hook up Sander about this. Now, this all got generated, and you see here that the Angular part has an error. This is kind of a race condition because it's still waiting for these things to build. So you got to have a little bit of patience. But now what you can see here is that it added the companies up here and it added the companies up here. So we automatically have now, for our newly created item in the database, we have our admin UI, and I can go ahead and say, hey, create company, and I'm going to recall this Bsoft Labs because that's the company I work for. And we should see it here. And you now get into your edit environment. You can edit stuff. And as of here, it's going to be just following the best practices. So if you know where to find this name field, you can start adding your own fields. For the front end, I didn't build it out yet. I'm just going to give you some space. This is most likely where you're going to build your stuff. I do small little tweaks, like I give you the file name or the component name. So if you search for your code base, you can find where this file is. So you don't need to know and understand where this one is. Use this file, copy it, put it in your search box in your editor, VS Code or IntelliJ. They all have great solutions to find these files quickly. So This is what gets generated, and this CRUD generator is what I literally asked last night. It's published about like 10 hours ago, and it's hot off the press. So this has been, for me, one of the goals, and I've been dreaming about this for years, literally. I've did like 20 attempts to get this right. I never got it right. I think I'm on the right track with this stack here. So yeah, for the demo, I know we're running short in time. So I think I made sure Docker is running. I ran the setup. I started the API GraphQL stack. I showed admin account management. I showed CRUD. I haven't showed the NXPM project structure, but like let's leave that for now. That's maybe another topic altogether. So a few things, a few thoughts. Automation. Automation is key. Schematics is amazing, and you should use them. If you're not using them, you're probably doing a lot of things manually that you shouldn't. Create a lot of small building blocks and chain them together. This is also the Unix or Linux philosophy. Have a really small tool that does one thing very well and chain them together. Make them chainable. And this is basically, in essence, what NXPM stack is. It's using the little building blocks that NX provides. It chains them together, adds a little bit of opinion, and it allows you to chain these all together into building great experiences like the ones we saw today. Opinion is key. It's essential to have an opinion about how to structure things. It might not be a shared opinion. It might not be your opinion, but having an opinion is essential. Think about it like Prettier. When Prettier first formatted your files, you were probably not happy with the results. But when Prettier formatted your coworker file, you were finally happy that their code looks legible. And I think this is kind of the thing there is. You don't need to agree with what you built. You need to be consistent with what you built. And that's more important. In a second project, you can always go back and readdress stuff. Or if it's really bad, you can readdress stuff. But if your only issue with this stack is like, hey, data access is 2 syllables, I like to have 1 syllable data like feature util, that's fine. That's something you can, yeah, you can either change it if that's your thing, or you can just accept it because it's very minor. Lastly, automate everything that you can do wrong or that you will forget. I've worked in automation for a long time, and if we didn't apply automation in certain things, people would just not do it. And it's not because they don't want to do it. It's just it's not important for them, and they have other things to do. They just want to get their work done. So automate everything. And again, I think if you work on things like this, personal opinion in a team is not really relevant. And I guess I'm kind of an autocrat, but I think if your CDO decides this is how we're going to do things, you're just going to apply with this. And if there's no real reason to fight it, why fight it? It's way better to have consistency than freedom. Most of these apps are not a democracy, and this is it shouldn't be like that. So why not build a starter template? Why go through all of this hours of work in getting this together in a generated way? Well, I think templates are harder to maintain. This one's not easy, but at least it gives me a one step before being a template. So one of the things with NXPM that I really see the pain, and I feel the pain myself of having to run this 5-minute installer. It kind of takes away the magic. People are maybe already talking in the meanwhile, talking to somebody on Twitter or doing something else. So I'm going to be creating starter templates built with NXPM. So it's basically a starter template generator. Generation is infinitely more flexible. So think about where I changed from Nest to Go, and where I changed from Angular to React and Ionic to Flutter. You can think about a whole tech matrix as long as these things have certain things in common, certain contracts that they adhere to. This is infinitely scalable. In change a starter template, you're going to copy and paste a whole lot of things. Another important thing to note is that generators are useful after creation. So with the starter kit, if you get like, there's some great starter kits like Angular material with NGRX. Super nice if you want to get this and build something. But now if you want to have like a second page that has its own NGRX implemented, you're going to copy and paste manually. So generators, they bring you back one step and they give you more power. And lastly, generators are building blocks for bigger apps. So I can imagine people, and I hope at some point this will emerge, people looking at NXPM and like, yeah, this is awesome, but I want to build a layer on top of this. I want NXPM to provide the building blocks. So if you got an idea of how to structure things, you should be able to take my data access library and combine it with my feature, but do the UI totally in your own different way. It should allow this. And having a starter template limits you instead of enables you to do things. So small little roadmap. I'm not doing any hard agreements here, but this is kind of where I'm heading towards. I'm going to get a first stable release. And with stable, I mean something that I advise you to build on. And I can more or less promise that I won't drastically change a whole lot of the structure, because this is kind of the most important things. I went over a few iterations on how to structure this well, and the thing I come up with today is scalable and it works. I'm going to be working on documentation and tutorials, and I'm going to work on an interactive experience where you can say yarn create NXPM stack, and it will ask you questions. What's the name of the stack? What's the NPM scope? And then down the line, when we get there, do you want Nest or you want to have Go? Do you want to have React or you want to have Angular? So I want this interactive experience to be your one go-to shop where you can just say, okay, start a new project, answer a bunch of questions, bam, generate it for you. Then further down the line, support for React, Ionic, and Go. So this is basically, if somebody contracts me to add React, Ionic, and Go, we can have this in a week. I'm just basically justifying work and time, mix and matching it. There's no reason this doesn't exist other than time. Really, it's all possible. We got proof of concepts for most of these stacks already. So if you're interested in working on one of these things, like Marius suggested, don't hesitate to reach out and we can have you work on something. And this is with regards to Michiel's question as well, adding more UI libraries. So I love Tailwind, and I definitely know its downsides because I worked with it quite extensively over the last months. I know it can be very ugly to look at these all these classes, and frankly, there might be people that look at this UI and like, okay, this is not exactly what I'm looking at. This is the opposite of what I want. That's totally fine. So Bootstrap is there, but it's not really well maintained. I don't give it focus at this point. Angular material will be there in the near future, so I hope maybe somewhere March or April that we're talking about. And then none. You're gonna get an unstyled version of this, so 0 styles applied. I might add maybe a few flexboxes and CSS grid to position it, but I'm not gonna add any color. So this is gonna be a black and white generated, basically blue links on a white text, plain HTML. But logic, you need JavaScript and you need logic so it can log you in and do all the Angular stuff. Now, another thing that I want to explore, and this is where I think really the power comes in and we can look at maybe pulling off building an ecosystem, lower level opt-ins. So next thing you want to do is, okay, I want to have a job queue, or I want to add sending emails, or I want to connect to some API, let's say GitHub or Shopify, whatever you want. So this is like lower level building blocks that you reuse, and then some feature level opt-in. So when you have this stack and this as a common base, you can think of, okay, adding a course platform on top of this or a CMS is going to be rather straightforward jobs because we need to think about how to do it. But if you can scaffold it out with commands and paste in some files and make it work, you can also automate it. So these are the feature level opt-ins. Courses, CMS. I'm working on some blockchain projects, so it would be super nice if I could just drop in Ethereum support or Kin support, just whatever chain I'm working with, drop it in, talk to this blockchain. Like there's no gain for me in having to reinvent this all, nor is it for you all. We just want to work with stuff. AI is some other thing that we might explore in the future. For a lot of these things, I'm gonna be promoting doing it similarly to NX. So I want to be available and build a few of these, but I cannot build them all. So I'm going to build a common layer. I'm going to document how to build these things. I'll probably do some live streams on it. And something like a CMS, I can see myself managing a CMS that goes with this, that works well. But if you're into AI, which I'm totally not, then I'm going to leave it all up to you. So I cannot build all the features, but everybody can. So that's it. That was it for today. Thank you all very much for having me. And any more questions, I'm happy to answer.
I think we have a single one. Maybe it's a quick one from Michiel as well. Like, you couldn't find the shared lib in your example real quick. So.
You're a smart man, Michiel. I know this already, but I realized when I was typing this out, in normal apps, if you're not using GraphQL, you most likely have a common interfaces thing. And this interfaces is generally the first thing you start out with. So Between backend and front end, I want to share my interfaces, so what the structure of my data looks like. However, with GraphQL, we kind of no longer need this because this is where your SDK comes in. So my backend hosts the shapes and my SDK generator generates them for the front end. So we have the same benefit, one source of truth for the shape of your data, but you don't need an extra layer because NX is not consuming it, NX is generating it. So it's kind of there. But yeah, no shared libs in this setup, but it doesn't mean you cannot make one. And I think the most obvious one, we can quickly go back to code here. So right now, what happens is that I think shared libraries in this case, well, GraphQL takes away the need to share between API and web. So this is kind of a non-issue. Let's say we have another website. Let's say I'm making an admin. So I'm going to generate the exact same app, but call it admin. So now I have two apps. I already mentioned a little bit, I got duplication. And for instance, here in my utilities folder, this is where the SDK lives. Now my SDK basically consists of a bunch of GraphQL queries. I don't have this plugin installed because I don't use VS Code that much, but this is GraphQL. Now this is where you go into duplication. And now you have two apps that both need to manage this list, and this doesn't scale because if you don't automate it, remember, it doesn't happen. So I'm always looking at doing shared libs. At the moment, I add another library of the same type. So another Angular library, then I want to look at, okay, I need to make this SDK shared. And maybe even your layout. If your layout's very opinionated, you have a company-based layout, this is also something that you move up. Another common one is UI elements, like doing buttons, forms, icons, loaders, etc. It comes with a few of these. Yeah. This is generally shared stuff. Yeah. So yeah, this, and then the way to, in a more practical sense, what it would look like is then, okay, instead of generating web UI, you're going to generate shared UI. So we'd have a structure like here, shared UI, and then inside shared. Let me quickly open this one up. Inside shared, I would also have a util. There you go. So this is the idea of sharing libs within this stack. Would consist of getting rid of. Now it gets interesting when you say I also have two APIs, because then shared is no longer, is shared really a common ground?
Yeah. Would be shared web, I guess, the shared API perhaps. So you can play with that, and there's probably some common ground in there where both of them would be drawing from. So I guess there's a scalable path to get there, but
yeah, and this is also the point where, from NXPM's point of view, I really don't have an opinion. I got a personal one, but the stack doesn't have one. And maybe also interesting to mention here, while we're at it, opinions from the stack, NXPM doesn't have any runtime dependencies. So whatever I get generated, there is not a single @NXPM import. So you're not relying on anything that I maintain in order for your app to work. I basically leave you with a very opinionated NX workspace, and this is where I take off. And there's a few dev dependencies, so it will run the, like for instance, the linter, do the sorting of alphabetical order of sort of several files, but that's about it. So there's no opinion there.
All right. I think because we had a lot of the questions during the talk as well, I think what's left here is just to share praise. Like Mary's really looking forward. Michiel's saying how much potential this in here and how much the people like you, the B-mans of the world, make our development life better. I think I can only agree with that. It's been a pleasure. It's been super inspiring to see you work. I'm really looking forward to what you're going to do with that. Stepan, Jeffrey, anything to add here?
No, he's doing a great job.
I agree with previous praise, and maybe not a question, just a quick feedback. I was trying in parallel to start it, and like the tool is definitely great. So many options, so many you can do with it. But like, I would like just to have a quick comment. If I want to try it, just what you showed, the demo, the scaffolding, that like NXPM, something like start.
Yeah.
Just to try as fast as possible, because I looked into documentation, like plugins, the configuration, and just got lost in it.
Overwhelming. Yeah, very good
There's
point,
so
Stepan.
much,
Yeah, there is very much to it. So what I can advise you, this repo, this is your quick access right now. And here I already basically did a job of documenting it. But what you really need to do is follow these 2 steps. Creating a new project, these 2. And if you follow this section, this will give you a working stack. Basically, the only requirement your computer has is, well, Node and NPM installed. I'm considering experienced devs here, so I'm not going to go over why or what. This is not a tool for starters. And Docker. It depends on Docker. If you really don't want Docker, you cannot run it because you maybe are on a certain Windows version that doesn't support it. It will connect to a local host Postgres. So if you cannot run Docker, you can pop up another Postgres as long as it has the right credentials and it listens on the right port. The stack doesn't really care, but the opinion leads to having Docker. With these 2 commands, you should be able to run it, and then the third one, setup. Now, if this doesn't work, that's a bug, because this should work, and this is how I test it as well. So I do a release, like last night at 4 o'clock, I was doing my release. I run these steps to make sure that this works. But here, I'm also very, very interested in what your ideas are. Like, what do people think? Does this need to be simpler? Can we have more? I don't know. I'm definitely looking for feedback. So test it out. Hit me up on Twitter or Discord if you wanna chat.
Yeah, thank you. That's probably really good to know. My problem was that I started with CLI and I was looking in CLI and I had to go this NPM and next PM.
So this might be a bit of confusion, but I got NXPM started out not as the stack. NXPM started out with a toolkit, and this is still supported, by the way, this is still relevant. A toolkit that helps you grow your NX workspace. Mainly what I needed was releasing. So if you want to release packages from your NX workspace, this is not related to NXPM, the stack, but it works with it. This will do a whole release of packages. It will release a bunch of packages. Actually, NXPM itself is managed by NXPM. It's kind of meta.
Yep.
Schematics here. Oh, that's interesting. So schematics here, this was my first attempt to building some schematics in React. So here I didn't know what I was doing. And a few months down the line, I'm building a scaffolding out of a fully complete stack with set schematics. I got a support here in the comments. So, but this is, for now, this is not where you want to be. And I know it's confusing and I need some time to add the stack documentation to this site because NXPM is changing focus, and these options are still there where you can go through your repository to your project and look at. So this should be Yarn NXPM. Look at it's not even there. Look at the projects you have and run generators. This all still works, but it's not really relevant now that I got the other building part. So yeah. Good comment, Stepan, and I would definitely, I will try and update the site soon so we can get some goodness.
Definitely also check out the NXPM release part. We're using it at XLayers project for you still. So
awesome. Yeah, this is super cool. Yeah, I know Jeff's using it, and yeah, it actually also, I think there's a saying: if you have like 3 hours to cut a tree, I'd spend 2 to sharpen my saw.
Abraham Lincoln said that.
Abraham Lincoln, I never knew who to address it to. This tool and these tool sets are definitely this. I didn't start out building this full stack generator, but I was allowed to do it because I had, for instance, release management figured out. So I knew if I'm going to build something in NX and I'm going to set it up, I don't have to worry about doing releases. And this, to this day, is one of the reasons this is quick, because I know it's been working for months. If I just do an NXPM release, it will do the right thing, or at least predictable thing for me. And yeah, this all ties in together in the little NXPM ecosystem here.
Awesome. I guess, I mean, we've run a little bit over time, but I guess there's so much enthusiasm, so much cool things to show. So I hope for the people watching an hour and a half video, I hope it's not too much. It's worth it at the end. Trust me. B-Man, to end it off, do you have any shout-outs, Twitter to plug? I mean, I guess we need that Twitter right now because I guess you're going to get a couple of questions in there.
So definitely, yeah, definitely. And more than welcome. I'm happy to talk about this stuff. And not only NXPM, if you have any questions about NX or Angular, scaling them, doing these kind of things, auto generation, or if you want me to look at your stuff, feel free. I'm running live stream on YouTube. I'm running a YouTube channel, and I'm doing mostly live streams at this moment. Tomorrow, actually, I got Alex Inkin from the Taiga UI project, and we're going to talk about building Angular libs, Angular UI libraries specifically. And I'm kind of, how do you say it? I tend to invite guests that are useful for me. I'm not sure if that, like, this is just what I like.
Sounds familiar.
I know this might be a Dutch habit, but I don't know. Actually going to ask Alex if he can give me some feedback on how to build proper UI libraries. What is his train of thought? What is his philosophy? And hopefully use some of that knowledge to improve whatever gets generated here. Now, awesome. This whole stack has been a result of me and Lars talking about structures. So I really can see great stuff. So follow me there. Follow the Angular Discord. There's a great community here. It's super active. We have daily chats about Angular and all related technologies. And other than that, it has been a pleasure to be here. I would have loved to visit Netherlands to do it live, but maybe sometime in the future.
Maybe next time.
We'll invite you. When the time is there, you're happy to come over and we'll do a meetup where you can just get on stage.
Sounds awesome, and I'm awesome. Always happily accept tickets. So that's totally fine. I really appreciate the gesture, Jeffrey. You shouldn't have done it, but
right
awesome.
Before we get to the end, I guess this one really ties it all together. Thanks, Bram, for your awesome talk. That was amazing. Lots of interesting stuff. Jeffrey, to finish her off for the night, we have another meetup, right? Not today, but sometime.
No, not today. No, at the end of 25th of this month, we will have Wasim. He will talk about the new era of static web apps with Azure Static Web App. So be here then. It's a little bit earlier. It's like 4:30 p.m. That's the Dutch time. So come on over and watch with us again to learn some new cool stuff.
Well, and I guess that on that note, thank you all. Thank you, Bram, specifically for your talk, and have a great night. See you next time. Bye-bye.